Okay, great to have everybody. Welcome to our virtual town hall, a webinar, developing an American and Major League Rugby pathway. This is a joint discussion with the Utah Warriors and Rugby ATL. Should be a lot of fun. You can drop some comments on the side here. We will get to those later. I'm Jeremy Jordan, voice of the Warriors, surrounded by a wonderful cast of characters. Let's walk you through them. Scott Lawrence, the general manager, head coach of Rugby ATL. Great to have you. Santi Sodini, international man of mystery. They call him the Silver Fox, I've heard. Pathway manager for Rugby ATL and the 404. Brandon Sparks, director of rugby for the Utah Warriors. And Chris Latham, the head coach of the Utah Warriors. And it is 9 a.m., Chris, in Brisbane, Australia. Great to have you. How was breakfast?
Breakfast was good, thank you. It's all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at the moment, so it's good.
Awesome. It's 5 o'clock in the Mountain Time Zone. It's 7 Eastern, so we are all over the world for this one. Going to have a great time. We're going to talk about a couple of things in this. A need for a pathway in the Utah and Intermountain region and the Southeast. We'll talk about the different positives, the different challenges that come with that. Also, the opportunities that are there for growth, not only in these communities, but in the whole country. Elevation of the sport, especially in the U.S. And, of course, the matchup. These two teams, the Warriors Selects and the 404, are going to match up Saturday at 1 Eastern, 11 Mountain. That can be streamed and watched on the Rugby ATL Facebook channel. So let's get right to it. Let's talk about Major League Rugby's future in growing the grassroots and pathways. And Scott, let's start with you. How do you see what you guys are doing with the 404 and the Utah with the Selects and other teams? How is that helping grow not only the community in rugby to get to the Major League Rugby team, but hopefully eventually the United States Eagles and beyond?
I think it comes down to two things, which are sustainability at the grassroots level, which we hope will get more young players playing. And then from there, when we get into the competitive phase of their life, that we're giving them enhanced experiences where they can get something in addition to their local club and bring that back to their club, which creates a flywheel effect that just keeps driving improvement at the grassroots level. Eventually, that'll create energy that'll push players into more quality universities and then hopefully into the MLR.
Brandon, you run the Warriors Selects for the Warriors. How have you seen this team grow in the community amidst the existing workflow that already was there?
Yeah, I mean, it's given the local talent somewhere to work towards and go to. It also gives them a realistic entry point into the Utah Warriors pathway. So it's no longer a mystery about how you can get here. So the fact that we've been able to communicate with the colleges, the high school, as well as the senior clubs around what we need and expect from players in this level, but then also so they know where to go and how to get there. It's been hugely beneficial to the local community.
Santi, how have you seen this in the Southeast? Because you guys definitely want the Atlanta talent, but you want the whole Southeast, I think, right?
Yes, we are doing this. We are developing the whole region. As you are saying, we have 6 states where we're already working at. We're finding that there's a lot of players in terms of teenagers. We're just trying to put everything together. We're trying to put a coaching development and player development for everyone. So when they get to under 18s, they have a proper skills and development so they can start looking at getting into a university or maybe to a national team to keep developing themselves and keep growing.
Chris, what was your experience coming up in a situation like this where you were perhaps at a young age saying, hey, maybe I want to play professionally? How can this help those kids in the United States that have that mindset?
Yeah, I was very fortunate actually when I started coming through the ranks that the pathway, especially for rugby, was strong, and the reason it was strong was because there was such an emphasis on having good supported, strong club rugby of all ages. So again, that's just basically getting kids in and getting them interested about our sport and starting to get that knowledge and I guess starting to get that little teaser of a feed of what the sport can provide and what it can do as an organisation. And then from there, you know, there was a lot of emphasis put on a strong school / college type competition, which then obviously ran into from that point of view, then you ran into your selects or what we called academy programs. So again, if you excelled at a club level, you excelled at a school level, you were then picked into a select/academy type system where then you started to get introduced into the more elite type coaching. You started to get a feel of what it was like to be a professional player. And then from there, if you were able to progress or they saw that you were capable of that next level, you were able to then move into the Super Rugby, or what we would call now the MLR. And, I guess as a coach, you're there to win, you're there to get trophies, you're there to get results, but ultimately as well, you want to get your players into the USA Eagles, and again, that's that pathway, and that's what you want to see, because ultimately, if you've got kids watching the USA Eagles being successful and they're representing their country, that alone is going to start getting interest from young kids. And then, as Scott said, that starts the wheel turning, and that starts the evolution of continuous talent keep coming through, and that pool continues to grow. And if we want sustainability in the MLR, and we want sustainability in the US, and we want this competition to grow, we're going to need that wheel to continue to turn at a fast rate, so we can just making sure that we're getting the best out of our athletes.
Continue to weigh in if you have a question on the side. We're seeing a few of those come in. We'll get to those in just a moment. So, Scott, let's talk about the differences and challenges and opportunities that Rugby ATL, and then we'll get to Utah, have in establishing this pathway.
I think if we look across the Southeast, we have different states have different levels of maturity around growth in the sport. So in some of those regions, we're really about helping new programs get started, as well as getting coaches educated to get those up off the ground. In other areas where, such as South Florida, where there's more established programs, it's about providing enhanced experiences for players where they can come in addition to their local club rugby, themselves and their coaches, and they can work with us, and we can give them development plans and things to help them along the way to top them up. And that's kind of moving from that twice a week, play on the weekend schedule to a gradual progression to growing into an academy where it's more days a week, and then they can go from there.
Santi, as the coach of that team, what are you seeing that's working? What are you hoping to improve with this in the next couple of years?
So, I'm in charge of this program. There is something that we talk a lot with Scott. When everything was canceled in terms of the league, we said, how can we get better? We started with trying to get this development program going on. And what we see is that as soon as we can start putting together a calendar for the whole region, and to give them competition, that's going to be getting a lot of development for them, because what we see as a big challenge is the situation here in the USA, that you have to compete in a certain way with other sports. You have a rugby, as you have that you play 5 months a year or 6 months a year, and then you play another sport. And this is not what happens, let's say, in Australia, or maybe New Zealand, maybe South Africa or England. Maybe you play there 10 months a year, and that's why you get better and better players and better coaching. So what we see as a target is to have, let's say, 8 to 9 months of rugby for these players. And as soon as they get more competition with a proper calendar, they're going to ask for more and more knowledge in terms of the game. So that's going to be helping us to encourage the coaches to get more knowledge as well.
Brandon, we got to get that heated field to get to 8 to 9 months a year, probably, right?
Yeah, definitely some warm coils in there would help.
What are you seeing from your standpoint as the coach of the Warrior Selects in developing these guys and gathering them and establishing this?
Yeah, similar to what Scott said, a lot of these players and where they're coming from are at a different maturity level in their game understanding and development. And it's, we looked at for select specifically, we looked at players that maybe fit a body profile size first, and then brought them in to see if we can't coach up their skill level to match what their potential is physically. So yeah, it's kind of the same problem across the board.
And you think about the leagues going into year 4, and the sustainability question with the league is, I think, obviously it's going well. It got beyond a year, which hadn't happened in another domestic league, so this is great news. But a lot of that conversation has been fiscal, but now we're talking about talent. So, Chris, what does this pathway mean for the future of the league in terms of developing the talent in the league?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you need to sell a product. And that product needs talent to sell. So ultimately, we want to make sure that, across the board that we're stretching our arms as far as we possibly can to get that net out, to get every possible person that we can that's interested in rugby. I mean, I haven't been in the US for that long, but I certainly quickly realised there are some genuine athletes out there in the US, and and it's just about making sure that we've got programs there where, yes, they are playing week in, week out at a regular basis rugby and getting to learn the game. And, and as it's been said, the more rugby they can play, obviously the more intrigued they get and the more questions they want and the more they want to source and the more that we can give them. But again, like you said, we need to make sure that talent is continuously evolving through. We need to make sure that each year the product that we produce is something that's, it's another level every year. It's something that keeps growing. We need to make sure, because at the moment, you talk to probably 1 out of probably 10 or 20 people on the street wouldn't have a clue what rugby is. And ultimately we need a product that's actually going to go out there and it's going to grab them by the neck and drag them into the game. We can't have a product that's just something that's just going to ease people in, or when they're bored, or some friend is going to say, hey, listen, we're going here, why don't you just tag along? No, we need something that's going to really reach out and grab them. And to do that, we need talent. So we need to make sure we harness that and produce it.
And along those lines, obviously, like you said, the sport needs to elevate. It needs to be more of a player in the game, right? And it is growing, which is awesome. And this will certainly help. For any of you, how do you think this will eventually help all the way up to the U.S. And hopefully getting to the World Cup and winning a couple games and advancing?
Jeremy, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to just around the growth and visibility of the sport. I think the important thing for us to remember, and I know Brandon and I have had conversations about this, is that we are a different sport, and parents, being one, are looking for a different experience for their children in terms of sport. And the values that rugby puts forward, the family atmosphere, the fact that you can step right into a club on day one and be a part of that fiber and be welcomed at any point is something that is unique to our sport and is global and remains throughout every step of any pathway that we develop. And so I think that's important for us to embrace in all of our programs.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts on that and or the how this is going to help the Eagles one day?
Yeah, I think the more that you embrace, you'll see those athletes that are looking for the different experience. You talk about the product that Chris it refers to. That's awareness, and then there's something to aspire to for young rugby players. They can say, "Hey, look, I can be a professional at this someday. I can play on television," which is unique for the United States, and more players vying for the same number of positions in fully professional environments can do nothing but produce better players, better coaches, and better administrators and referees and across the board. It's amazing what happens when you go from working a job during the day and spending it to waking up every morning. And this is what you think about. This is your life every day. and it's a special thing that we have going on, and I look forward to having more people come into it.
Just on that point as well, I mean, we talk about the opportunities to be in the Eagles and things like that, but rugby is a very unique sport, one of very few that's played in just about almost every country in the world. I mean, the opportunities that rugby will give you, not only in the USA, not only in France, Australia, Europe, but you can travel the world. And touching on that point about Scott said about going into any club for any parent or child and being part of it, that extension goes around the world. It doesn't matter where you go in the world. If you play rugby or you've played rugby or you're involved with a rugby club, you can be on the opposite side of the world and mention rugby in a club, and all of a sudden, you found yourself a new family. You're welcomed in, and you're part of that fraternity. So, again, just touching on that point, that's the beauty of our sport, and that's the beauty that I'm yet to see in too many other sports.
And amen to that. As a guy that covers a lot of different sports, rugby is the one where I was fully embraced immediately, as opposed to shunned for not knowing about it. And it's great. And I am still shocked that both teams break bread after and have a few drinks together. I'm like, what? That's insane. I can't imagine that in some other sports, and I love that. So that's great. We have a few questions. Let's get to a couple of those now. We'll get to a few later as well. If you have some, drop a comment on the side here. Rob Hammerschmidt says, how do your respective development pathways connect with the USAR and provide a pathway for the best players to connect with the Eagles development process? I'll open it to the group.
Not everybody go at once.
All right. Or you want to take a stab at it first, Scott?
No, go ahead, Brandon.
I mean, like with the Eagle with the developing talent for the Eagle pathway, the great thing is everybody in both of these staffs have a strong connection to that USA pathway, so we're able to go directly to them and recommend players or talk about players that we see. So yeah, it's kind of with a professional league, like the performance on the field should be able to stand alone as a reason why they should be selected. And if we can use that to help them and nurture them to give them the skills that we need based on what Gary and the rest of the staff is looking for, then we've done a good job, and it will take care of itself. Yeah,
I think having done some work for USA Rugby in the past, their hurdle is scale, and scale of talent identification is something that we can help with. If we are looking in our respective regions and growing the grassroots, but also developing the top talent in that region and providing visibility through competition, and then being really good stewards of the information around those players so that they are easily talked about, and we can communicate with USA Rugby when it comes to a high school American or Unite or collegiate American or whatever program that we're working with. That's our role.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. It was pretty cool in the World Cup roster last year to see, okay, for the first time ever, every dude was a pro. That was just really cool to see from Major League Rugby, of course, internationally, all the different leagues. Okay, Alema Fatissimano II. Is the pathway flexible enough to fast-track talent identified using MLR to develop potential Eagles? What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's something that we were talking about. I mean, this is all about bringing more competition to them, and what they are going to be part of a high-performance ambient. So for the selectors, when they have to pick someone, they know they are going to be on that level, so they can go forward and play internationally without being, having a problem to adapt to that kind of level of competition.
And is playing on TV make it just easier? You just more film of guys? Is that too simple of an answer here?
I think it's two parts. I mean, I think it's visibility through multiple, streams of media, I guess. But the second part is just the connection and the network. And we're committed to working with the USA Rugby and producing Eagles. And I know, you can see Brandon shaking his head there. Absolutely. So the most important thing is connections between MLR and USA Rugby, so that when we identify talent, when we feel like that player can be fast tracked, that we work together with USA Rugby to make that happen.
Okay, good questions. Keep them coming. We'll get to a few more coming up. Okay, topic 2. Let's talk about the short and long-term plans of both the Rugby ATL 404 and the Utah Warriors and the Select. So I guess we'll take a second to have each team explain kind of the pathway for each team, the similarities and differences with your program compared to, say, the other or others in the league. We'll start with Rugby ATL and the 404.
Go ahead, Bud.
So basically, we have a big region. So that's our challenge here. So we already started with Georgia, of course, and now we are working towards to get a proper development in South Florida, where we have a big amount of players there. So we're planning to have an academy there. We have everything planned, but because of this particular situation, we have to postpone everything. Our plans was to start working there with, as Scott said, with an academy training twice a week and have a team there for young players in Miami area. And we postpone everything, but as soon as the situation gets better, we're going to start working there again. So we're targeting to start in January, February with this academy there, and to have the pathway going on there as well. We have under 18s working with us in the last 3 months from the Georgia area. And then the 404 has been working with the community side as well for the high school to provide them a sort of rugby experiences for young kids as well.
And Jeremy, I just want to make sure that we kind of highlight that our partnership with USA Rugby South, who has been doing this at the grassroots level and developing talent and identifying talent for their teams for a long period of time. So that's been a really fruitful partnership, and we'll continue to work with them, providing them coaches and as well as players into their pathway.
All right, Brandon, you want to take the Utah Warriors side of this?
Yeah, I mean, our 48-hour short-term goal is to go out to Atlanta and have a good showing against Scott and his team. So that's like short term. From there, like Santi was saying, with our current situation here in the pandemic, our best laid plans suddenly became mute. So we've kind of had to revision how we're going to do this and what we're going to do with it, and how to connect things in our new normal. But we've done a good job with it, I think, so far. And moving forward, we're going to keep identifying talent by being more active in the surrounding states, similar to what 404 is doing, as well as creating competitions for teams that come in to help us identify them, and then just the usual talent identification, whether it be a combine, whether it be us going to tournaments to watch, so on and so forth, and then just extending the invite to players and get them involved into our program.
And Chris, there's certainly many goals with this. What's the end game with the Warriors Selects? Is it to find young players from the community to join the club? Is it to grow the community and the program as a whole? Is it all of those things?
It's everything. I mean, it keeps going back to that wheel of producing, and not every kid that comes into the selects is going to make it. But what we hope out of that is those selects go back to their clubs, and again, that's about having good relationships with the local clubs, being able to provide them with coaching expertise from the Warriors, and creating those relationships where those clubs can come in and see what we're doing as well. And and it's those kids that don't happen to make it in the selects. We want those guys having had a great experience, and going back to their clubs and I guess showcasing what they've learned, showcasing what that next level is, and being able to communicate that with club level players. And again, that just creates that interest, it creates that expertise. And whilst we're doing that, we want to keep those, whilst we're talking about wanting to produce the next player and everything else, we also need to produce the next coaches. I mean, there's no use talking about, we want to find the next X player. We want to be able to get that player to be a USA Eagle. Ultimately, we need to make sure that we've got coaches that are able to, I guess, coach the specifics and the core values and the core skills of what our sports aligned around and based on. And again, that's they're all the things and the relationships that we're creating with local clubs, schools, colleges, across the board, down to our youth as well. So again, it's not just about producing the next USA Eagle. It's not about just producing the next MLR. It's about making sure that we're active in the community and we're preaching what is rugby and what makes rugby so unique, and preaching about how we can improve not only your life, but your child's life and across the board, your whole family's life by being involved in rugby, whether it's being a coach, helping out as a volunteer, helping your local club, your local school out, anything, whatever that is. It's just about making sure that we've got that banner across the board covered as well.
Two things there. I didn't think we'd have a whilst used during this, so that's excellent. And then I love your point about students becoming the teacher, the players becoming the coach, because now you really grow up from that. That's a great point. Scott, what else are you hoping the 404 provides for Rugby ATL and the community?
I think we'd like to offer a competition that players can represent their home states in the Southeast region. I think that's the first start at the U19 level. Give them an opportunity to come and be a curtain raiser and play at Rugby ATL games. Give them that experience to get together and be competitive and then move on from there. I think that's a two-sided benefit for us. Is one, gives us an opportunity to work with the coaches that are coaching those states, learn from them, and hopefully the other way around. And then second is identify players into what a pathway. And if you gave me a year goal, I'd love to be on a plane a different direction with a group of U19s on my way to Salt Lake to play, the Warrior Selects U19s.
We noticed we've gone about half an hour into this, and I haven't mentioned the score of the game between Rugby ATL and Utah Warriors. There's probably a reason for that, but we probably should mention that. It was the season opener. Rugby ATL won 28-19. So looking forward to the next matchup in 2021. But as you guys mentioned, the Selects and 404 are going to play Saturday. You can watch it streamed. And are people able to go to the game there locally? Are you selling tickets to that? Yeah,
they're welcome to attend, and there's plenty of open seats and spacing. You can socially distance and enjoy a rugby game at the same time.
Awesome, very nice. Okay, let's get some more questions. Al Levine. Now, how does it differ when you look at players from college versus club? Brandon, you mentioned looking at guys in first of their physical frame. Does that translate to club as well, where players maybe have more experience generally? What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, at this level, there's always going to be a physical need. But again, that's the great thing about rugby is, there's always smaller players that maybe wouldn't make it in football that would really excel here in rugby. And the same thing, there's sometimes big guys that might look like a prop, but suddenly end up on the wing or in the centers. So while physical tools are important, it's not the begin all and end all for a selection process. The big thing and I think we can all agree on this is, making sure that players have the mastery of the fundamentals of like pass, catch, control, contact, communication, and rucking. After that, what they look like and how they look like is just, frosting on our cupcake. So, yeah, I don't think it's a strict question about the size of a player. It's more about the fundamentals and them being able to do the simple things right. Like one thing that we noticed when we were scouting that draft list was a lot of the players had the inability to identify an overload. So like we look for that right off the bat. Are there players that can see a 2-on-1 and then execute the 2-on-1, which again goes back to those core skills that are needed.
Yeah, I think there's selection into the environment, and then there's selection at game time in these pathway games. So if you find somebody who has a high level of athleticism, really solid work ethic, and is willing to learn, they may not get selected on the Saturday at U19 level. They may be selected into the environment. And you actually don't want guys that just want to be handed a start because of potential. You want men and women that are willing to work for it, and they understand that they're going to have to work their way into enough game understanding and skill to be able to compete at that level. And it's our job to create environments where they are pushed and the standards are high, and they have to work for it.
Fantastic. Keep the questions coming. Daniel Klingesmith, sorry, late to the party. Just got in from the deer stand. Cheers, Warrior coaches from Northern Michigan. We got a couple of Michigan guys here, and Scott Lawrence, former Michigan State Spartan. Brandon Sparks, a Western Michigan Bronco. Is there a ratio of homegrown/import players clubs are required to abide by? Has USA Rugby set that standard?
There's not. There's a salary cap. So rosters are variable in number. So there isn't. They're not static rosters, and so there is no ratio. There is a number of foreign players that can be in the game day, 23 every week, and that's how we keep the ratios in check.
Okay, awesome. We'll get to some more questions coming up in a moment. All right, topic 3. What does the future of pathway development look like in the U.S., the MLR, and each of the local markets? So hopefully we get a World Cup, right, 2027 or 31. Hopefully the U.S. is in a great position to not only host and host it well, which I don't doubt we will, but to compete at a high level. So how will this help grow the grassroots pipeline of players? Anyone?
Yeah, I guess if you look at Australia, who hosted the 2003 World Cup, and you know, I guess around the world, when you think of Australian rugby, most people think that rugby here in Australia is the number one sport, or is up there with the number one sport. The reality is we're probably number 4 or 5 with all the other sports available and are more popular throughout Australia. But in 2003, when we had the World Cup here in Australia, you know, the amount of interest and exposure that the World Cup gave, all of a sudden, you know, I think we almost grew to number 3, and it probably doesn't sound that big of a difference, but from number 5, 6 to 3 was a huge difference to participation numbers in youth level. It certainly showed a growth in talent coming through, you know, 4 or 5 years later, 6 years later. So again, it's from experience, having that World Cup and having that competition in your own backyard certainly does relate to more people wanting to play the sport and wanting to get involved from a youth level. And again, you know, that's where your future is in your youth, and you know, that would be fantastic for USA Rugby.
I got to ask what the top 3 or 4 sports are ahead of rugby then.
Well, you've got cricket, AFL, rugby league, soccer. They're just straight off the bat, and then you've got every other sport, hockey. You know, they actually take quite a big chunk. Basketball to a degree, baseball. I mean, there's you name a sport, it's here, and you know, we're competing with them. But the top 4 of those, you know, your AFL, your rugby league, your soccer and cricket.
Aussie Rules football fan right here, by the way. I don't have a team, but I love watching it. It's great.
Brisbane Lions, mate. Just jump on them.
You got to bring me a ball back, by the way. I'll pay you back. I need an Aussie Rules football.
We're not that small.
Okay, yeah, Scott, your thoughts on if the U.S. can host, what that would mean. And I recall the '94 World Cup for soccer had this impact on a generation of kids. We're not saying like Claudio Reyna was one of the forwards on that team. His kid Gio is playing at a really high level in Europe now, and it's like, oh, could that happen for, and hopefully quicker than that, for rugby? What could this pathway mean for them?
I think you saw with MLS, that World Cup, there was, a professional league tied into getting that World Cup. That was one of the conditions. So it would definitely a correlation there and a tie into their growth. I think there's a couple things. One is if you look at the trajectory of the MLR and you compare that to the MLS on average attendance and growth, you're going to see that we're going to reach an attendance level 14 years in advance of what MLS did if we continue this growth. And that is so if you think about that in a 2027 scenario, which really is not that far away, and you look at providing the electricity of a World Cup playoff game, the atmosphere of people from all over the world inside the stadium, and you can capture that with American fans. And I think you do that in a way that infuses a bit of American sport and entertainment into it, then it's going to be something that young players are going to want to be a part of.
For Santi and Brandon, would you describe what the ideal pathway looks like for American local players to get into a program and eventually excel at the highest level?
Yes. So I will go first if you want, Brandon. Yeah. So we're thinking about, as Scott said, and we're thinking about helping the local clubs. We're not here to be arrogant. We're helping them. So as soon as the players start developing, we're going to be encouraging them to play more rugby. So that's why we came up and say, okay, guys, we have an academy, we have a structure that is going to be starting with under 15, under 16. From there, the player will have exposure to high performance and how to train to get better every day. This is not only for fun. This is for players who want to get better and they have the dream to be an Eagle. So as soon as they got into our structure, we look at them and we're going to be providing all our knowledge, all our information we have and all the pathway we built to get them better and to keep them growing to the next level. So the end of that pathway in terms of, before getting to university is going to be the under 18s, under 19s with our, let's say, regional teams. And then from there, start playing against other MLR under 19 teams. And then again, from that place, going up and be part of a university, keep developing themselves, maybe within our structure or keep growing individually, but our, let's say our program is going to be part of them as well, because we're going to encourage them to keep growing. And then as soon as they get to the draft, they're going to be open to have an MLR team picking them up. And then, as you said, if they are going to be part of a regional team, national selectors are going to be checking them out, and then they're going to be part of a database where they can say, okay, we have props, we have second rows, we have fly halves that we can pick them, and this is not going to be a problem to have everything on the same place for USA national selectors. That's what we feel like this is going to be our pathway. And then, of course, if they compete in the MLR and they are good enough, for sure, Gary or anyone who's going to be the coach, they're going to be selecting them to be part of the national team.
Yeah, I think he really hit it all on the head there. The only things that I'll add is we need to, as a group and as a league, to make sure that we keep the pathways affordable and accessible to all athletes. That was one lesson that I took away from examining and talking with USA Soccer, and about how their academy model had really hamstrung their efforts. So we need to make sure that we're doing that. The other important thing too is what Chris hinted at, was making an effort to develop coaches, but more importantly is making an effort to include the referees in the developmental process on all the academy levels, because at the end of the day, you should always look at rugby as like a triangle, and at the top is the players, and the two bases are the players and the coach. And if either one of those bases fails the player, the whole game fails. And one area that we identified the immediate improvement is the referees. So making sure that it's inclusive to not just all athletes, but all referees and all coaches, and then making sure that we keep, rowing that boat in the same direction, and all of our efforts count towards something, which is making rugby better in the United States, and more eyes on our game, and celebrating our athletes and all of the people involved in it.
Look, you drop a row the boat, PJ Fleck, Western Michigan. I knew that would come out at some point. That was great. I want to ask you more about you had to, right?
Yeah.
I want to ask you more about the officials. I hadn't thought about that part in this process. A lot of the officials that show up at the MLR games are international. There are some Americans, but is that something that needs to grow exponentially as well? More American officials?
Yeah, Scott should chime in on this too. But yeah, there should be more American officials, and I would love to put a call of action out there to all college coaches, and they should be having their college athletes, their college rugby players, getting certified as referees and refereeing youth games in their local community, both to help them understand their knowledge of the game, but also it can be a recruiting tool for them as well too, because there needs to be more referees that are able to keep up with the new pace of the game in modern rugby, and there needs to be students of the game, or there needs to be students of the game when it comes to referees that take performance, and their performance, their fitness, their health, all of that just as serious as our athletes.
Okay, let's get to a couple of questions. Unless there's any more comments, just step right in. Alema Fetissimano II again. How will the MLR partner with collegiate programs to develop their talent? Open to the group.
There are windows within D1A, for example, infrastructure that allows for collegiate players to be a part of unpaid academies. That's kind of part one. Now, we all know the collegiate landscape is a bit fractured in terms of how they work together. So there isn't a single answer to that. Where there are competitions that are collegiate competitions that are more open to their players getting better, we work with them. For example, Kennesaw State has 5 players that are in our academy in the 404 that train 2 nights a week, doing additional development, and then they go back to their club and they play there. So I guess that's a long way of saying it depends. It depends on the competition. Life University down the road is part of a competition that does not allow interaction with the MLR. So we respect that, and we look to provide opportunities for them in the windows that are available.
The Warriors have a Life alum who also went to BYU in Utah. It's Sean Davies, who's on the coaching staff. And I always mention it. He's my former roommate. I love Sean. He's great. Rob Hammerschmidt again. Given the MLR draft, should there be a homegrown player designation for teams? If so, what's the magic number?
I guess this is just listening to obviously before about it and relating it back to here in Australia, especially in Queensland, where Queensland was the biggest producer of rugby players out of their academy, and all those guys went out to obviously various teams around Australia. And, I think that went on, and that was very strong. When I was playing Super Rugby for Queensland, our academy system was tremendously successful and strong. And before long, obviously, it started to get to a point where Queensland Rugby said, well, how come we're producing all these players? We're the ones investing all this money in developing these players, yet we only have a certain amount of cap space or a certain amount of space for these guys, yet the rest of them are going around Australia and we're giving them to everyone else. And before long, the academy and finished. And hence now the reason why we're sitting at the moment with, we're complaining that we don't have enough talent coming through. We don't have the facilities or the resources to develop players because we don't have those academies anymore. So I think, definitely there needs to be something set or something done along down the track as this system gets better and as this system gets more improved and we start investing. And as Brendan said, we want to make sure that with our selects and things like that, we want to keep it cost effective. But the reality is the bigger we grow and the better we get, the more expense and the more things are going to be and the more that people are going to expect out of these programs. So ultimately, I think, there needs to be something put in there where, states or teams or academies or wherever those players are getting the majority or if not all of their development done by, there needs to be some kickback or there needs to be something available or put in there where, it's not just a matter of you putting all your resources, all your time, all your money and effort into developing a player. They go off to college and then all of a sudden they're open up to the open market because ultimately it's just not going to be sustainable for the long run. But for the part now where we're at, yes, I can see how it needs to be the way it is. But for the long sustainability of all this, there needs to be something that's going to get kicked back to those markets that are willing to put the effort into building these programs.
And I wanted to ask you about, obviously, the college system with athletics in the United States is kind of unique, right? And it can be an impediment in certain sports, right? Like if you're really, really good at a certain age in soccer, you don't go to college, you go to Europe and you sit in an academy or whatever, right? How do you navigate that in the United States and trying to leverage it into a thing you can use positively as opposed to perhaps muddying the process? For Chris, since in Australia it's the same thing.
Again, it's obviously different. We don't have such a big college type system here in Australia. It's more they come out of school, a very strong school rugby competition into, what we did have was a very strong club competition, and again that's even diminished to a point now where our club system isn't very strong. And again, about obviously resources from the top not being there. But again, from an MLR point of view, for me, relationships need to happen in that area. We need to start forming relationships and forming competitions, forming things where we align. Not having the ability to say, no, you've got no access, or no, you can't do, because the reality is, the further down the track we get with our programs with clubs and our relationships with clubs and youth rugby and things like that, ultimately we're going to be developing those players that are ultimately going to end up in college anyway. So there is going to be that relationship with teams and players. And as I know, as you'll find in rugby, rugby is all about relationships, and once you have a relationship with a player and a strong relationship with players, the beauty of rugby is there's a hell of a lot of loyalty there, and that's probably one of the things that I love about rugby is the loyalty, the rugby loyalty that's there with clubs, and it's shown. So at the end of the day, there is going to have to be that conversation. There is going to have to be that alignment with MLR clubs, university colleges, and also, that next step is USA Rugby and Eagles. It's all going to have to. It's all going to have to run inclusive with everyone. It just has to happen that way.
Yeah, I think Jerem, the way that we think about it is where else do you get a group of 18 to 23-year-old men and women who are have access to what most student centers would be considered a world-class facility? They don't have the distractions of competing with other sports that they do in high school, so they can dedicate their time to rugby and to study. And you got them all in one place. That is an opportunity for us to grow the sport. I think we have to be careful not to try and wrap ourselves around being NCAA or being varsity in every location. That's a great mountaintop, but kind of the next rock, just up the path there is, let's just start with providing coaches and helping with coach development that can foster an environment where he or she may get a weight program in between their 740 and 920 class that they can go kind of knock that out during the day, and then they get practice 3 days a week. So there's an opportunity for us to take the I would say the programs that are purely amateur at the collegiate level, help them get a little bit closer to the ones that are completely varsity at the collegiate level. And that's where we're going to see the most dividends.
Well, we're coming to the end here, so I guess we'll just go around the horn. And any final thoughts about the topics we've discussed, or anything else you want to mention? Let's start with Santi.
So I think we have a big challenge here and a good opportunity, especially something you mentioned is about the World Cup coming into USA. That's going to be a cornerstone for everyone. And this is part of our challenge to have everything together: universities, USA Rugby, MLR, local rugby clubs. So everyone is going to be part of that to keep the sport growing, and not someone to get the organization, their ambient, their culture they're building every day, saying these guys are killing me or that these guys are here to destroy. So we're part of this rugby community, and we're here to grow and to keep going as a group, as a union. Not because we are a union, but because this is the way we get better as a country and as a sport here. This is the mindset.
Awesome. Brandon, then Chris.
Yeah, I mean, for me, in closing, I want our community to know, not just the Utah community, but the rugby community as a whole in America, that we're here to be a resource to you. And don't hesitate to reach out to Chris or I or the rest of the coaches and players and let us help you achieve whatever your goal is, whether it be at a club level, player level, coach level, or referee level. That's our job, and that's something that we're passionate about. And I think we all recognize how lucky we are to be in this position to be able to help out like that and grow the game that we've loved and given us so much. So yeah, use us as a resource, please.
Yeah, it's pretty much along those lines of Brendan. It's where, this isn't about taking over or taking what you've done or being the messiah of the whole thing. This is about giving. This is about producing and making lives better. This is about introducing people to a product to a game that has lifelong, advantages for you. I've been very fortunate to live that life. Traveled the world, met some great people, and made $1 or $2 from playing a game that I loved. And this isn't about, like I said, taking over anything. This is just about making sure that we spread the word and give every child that opportunity to experience the things that I've been lucky enough to have and do and see. So again, this is about being a resource. This is about being there available to make sure that if you've got a question, we can answer it. If you want help in doing something, we can provide that help. If we can't provide that help, we'll sure as hell find someone that can give you that help. It's not about having all the answers. It's about making sure we find the answers if we don't have it. And that's what we want to do.
Let's finish with Scott.
I think for the 404, it's just to echo what Brandon and Leto have said, and that is we're not only a resource, but if you want to be a part of our network and you want to be a part of something that's growing, reach out to us. We're always looking for good coaches that we can help be better coaches. And in return, will help us be better coaches as we understand the things you're going through week in and week out with your program. The second thing I'd say is that I hope that everyone understands that the MLR is serious about this. We've seen a hire this week for a youth coordinator. There is already conversations going on like these, but in terms of getting consistency of grassroots development across the league, and we've put our money where our mouth is with domestic incentives so that we can not only incentivize teams to bring more American players on board, but also provide salary cap space for GMs that are serious about bringing in domestic talent and investing in them and understanding that it's going to be 2 to 3 years to get the right product on the field with American players.
Well, this has been fantastic. I've learned a ton. Hopefully our audience has. We appreciate the questions and comments that have been put in the chat here. And we look forward to the game on Saturday. Again, that's at 1 Eastern, 11 Mountain, 404 versus the Warriors Selects in Atlanta there. If you want to watch it or go check out Rugby ATL's website, you can stream it. You can enjoy it in person as well. Should be a ton of fun. So this was a conversation about developing an American and MLR pathway, a joint discussion. And this was awesome. Scott Lawrence, Santi Sodini, we really appreciate the time. Of course, Brandon Sparks and Chris Latham, all the way from Australia for Chris early in the morning. Thanks, guys. This was great. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Billy.